Hi everyone, I'm Devi and I'm a PhD student in the Institute of Evolution and Biodiversity in Munster. And today I'm going to talk about the effect of rearing history and rear experience in host preference in Nasonia. First of all, uh, yeah, first of all, I want to talk about what's the importance of host preference. For an organism to survive and successfully reproduce, it needs some sort of resources, and it has to be an appropriate resource. In organisms like parasitoid wasp, these resources are often obtained in the form of hosts. And yeah, and this is one of the important factors determining their fitness. And there could be different factors affecting this host preference. It could be genetic or environmental. And today I'll be talking about which of the potential environmental factors determines host preference in parasitoid wasp. And this is also relevant, the host preference is also relevant to different questions in evolutionary biology, such as sympatric speciation, parasite-host coevolution, and generalist versus specialist adaptation. I try to understand the environmental factors affecting host preference in parasitoids using a parasitoid wasp, Nasonia, which parasitize wide range of diphtheran fly pupae. And there are 4 different species of Nasonias known: Nasonia vitripennis, Nasonia giraltae, longicornis, and monida. Nasonia vitripennis, which is a cosmopolitan species, is a host generalist, meaning that they have wide range of hosts that they can parasitize. And the other 3 species are native to North America, and they are host specialists, meaning that they prefer only certain type of hosts. So I wanted to, as I said before, I wanted to answer the effect of rearing history and prior experience in host preference. So I did all these host preference experiments on these 2 hosts. In these 2 hosts belonging to the family Caliphoridae. So the bigger one is Caliphora, which will be represented as C in the following slides. And the smaller one is Lucilia, which will be represented as L. So as you could see here, sorry, some reason. Yeah, so as you could see here, the first 2, so I divide the Nasonia into 2 groups, one reared in Caliphora and reared in Lucilia, meaning that they are developed or they developed from Caliphora or Lucilia. So I do this for over 10 generations. Then they are divided into 2 further 2 groups with the combination of prior experience. So here the prior experience meaning that they are allowed to be with the host for 24 hours to obtain certain cues and also to feed on the hosts. Yeah, then my experiment goes like this. So I did a cafeteria experiment with all the 6 different treatments that I showed before. The first letter always represents where they developed from, which I would be referring as rearing history. And the second letter represents the host that they had experience with, which I would be referring as prior experience. In the first 2 groups, you see that it's 0, meaning that they did not get any experience, and I would be calling them as naive wasps from now on. So for each treatment, 70 different wasps, and in a single tube, there will be 1 wasp with 5 of different hosts, as you could see here, 5 Caliphora and 5 Lucilia, and then I leave them for 24 hours at 25 degrees. And after 24 hours, I stop the interaction of the wasp and the host, meaning that I take the wasp out of the tube and leave the host for 10 to 12 days at 25 degrees. So after 10 to 12 days, I check how many of them developed into flies, meaning that they were not parasitized. And then I open the ones that are not parasitized. Sorry, I open the ones that are parasitized, meaning that they did not develop into flies, and score them as host killing if they did not have any offspring and only paralyzed and killed by the wasp, and the ones which has the offspring from the wasp. Yeah. And I calculate two different types of preference indexes based on two different scorings. The first one is number of Caliphora and Lucilia killed, regardless of presence or absence of Nasonia offspring. And then I calculate another preference index based on the number of Caliphora and Lucilia with Nasonia offspring. Here I would like to show you how the preference index looks like. So here is a representation of a preference index. On the y-axis, you could see the index ranges from +1 to -1. And in the x-axis, it has different treatments for all the 4 species. And here I'm only representing the naive wasps. So the positive index the positive index represents the preference for Caliphora, and the negative index represents the preference for Lucilia. And when the preference index shows 0, meaning that they do not have any preference. Yeah, as you could see here, all the species of Nasonia, regardless of where they were reared from, they all show a positive preference index, except Oneida for this treatment, where we have one exception, meaning that they all do prefer Caliphora. Even though we see in Nasonia vitripennis, the magnitude of preference is different, but here we do not know whether it's significantly different or not. So yeah, after calculating the preference index, I wanted to know the first question that I asked: what is the effect of rearing and prior experience? First, let's see the effect of rearing history. To understand the effect of rearing history, I compared the preference index between the wasps that were reared in Caliphora and reared in Lucilia, and they were naive and did not get any experience. As you could see here, only for Nasonia vitripennis, it seems like the difference between these two treatments is significant, meaning that only for Nasonia vitripennis, which is also a generalist, has an effect of rearing history in their prior experience. Okay, then I wanted to know how does it affect when they get an experience. For that, I compared these two groups where they get same rearing history, but they do have a different kind of prior experience. Then I did the same for the other combination where they differ in their prior experience, but have similar rearing history. As you could see here, all the preference indexes for almost all the treatments showed a significant difference for these between these treatments. Except again, we have another exception here. The preference index calculated using number of Nasonia offspring did not show any significant difference between these two treatments for Nasonia longicornis. This brings to my conclusion that all the 4 species of Nasonia as naive wasps, when they did not get any experience, they show preference for Caliphora, the bigger host, independent of where they were developed from. However, the rearing history seemed to have an influence on their host preference in the generalist species Nasonia vitripennis. But once they get an prior experience in their later adult life, with that experience overrules the effect of rearing. This could indicate that the generalist species are more plastic in their behavior. And the third point is the prior experience in all the 4 species has an effect, but prior experience, but not the rearing history, has an effect on all the specialist species. Then I asked myself, okay, which steps of the host selection process is affected by these environmental factors? So host selection in parasitoids is it is a complex process. So once a wasp emerges out of the host, the habitat that she emerged from might or might not contain the host or the suitable host that she could parasitize. So she first has to find the host habitat. Once she locates the host habitat, she has to locate and recognize the host or that is suitable for her offspring. And then she has to regulate the host. In some cases, they do paralyze the host to arrest their development, and then she should accept the host. We also have these stages in Nasonia. I'll walk you through these pictures. So once a Nasonia finds the host, she hops on the host and then do this drumming behavior with her antenna, which we call it as a drumming. And then she drills a hole on the host and injects venom, which paralyzes the host and stops the further host development. And then she feeds on the host hemolymph, which helps in her egg maturation. After that, she lays eggs on the host. Yeah. So I did a two-choice test where I took a petri dish and have two different types of hosts, either Caliphora or Lucilia. I mean, a Caliphora and a Lucilia. And then I dropped the wasp in the middle and score for the following behaviors for 1.5 hours. So first I check which one she contact first, and then I write it as first contact, either Lucilia or Caliphora, and then which one she drums on and which one she drills on. So all these three behaviors I do observe in this 1.5 hours. After that, I take the host and put it at 25 degrees, and after 10 to 12 days, I check whether they were killed, meaning that no flies emerged from the host. And if they were not, if they were parasitized and there is no fly emerged, then I check whether they have offspring or only killed. So the host killing would be, again, regardless of presence or absence of offspring, and then egg laying, meaning that they have offspring. And today I'll be only focusing on the first contact and host killing, which I take as a representative of the traits host recognition and host acceptance, meaning that first contact is a trait of host recognition and host killing as a trait of host acceptance. For this experiment, I used only the wasps that has prior experience. So I used this 4 combinations of rearing history and prior experience. And I did not do this experiment on the naive wasps because in my pilot experiment, this 1.5 hours was not enough for them to recognize and successfully kill the host. They needed much longer. Yeah, and then again, I want to focus on these factors that I've been talking about, reading history and prior experience, but I also want to here include the interaction between these two environmental factors on their effect on host recognition and host acceptance. So I did a GLM to see which of the factors has an effect on their host recognition and host acceptance. As you could see here, only prior experience showed significant effect on host recognition and host acceptance. So since here we only see that prior experience has a significant effect on these two traits, I wanted to compare the treatments which differ in their prior experience. Here you see 4 blocks representing 4 different species that I tested, and in each block the x-axis represents the proportion of female wasps, either showing the behavior on Caliphora, which is represented as dark brown, and whether it is showing on Lucilia, which is represented as in light brown. And then in the y-axis, you see the treatments. And here the comparison was always done between the treatments that differ in their prior experience but has similar reading history. As you could see here, in all the 4 species, for the trait host recognition, the proportion of wasps that choose Caliphora and Lucilia are different for the treatments that differ in their prior experience. And they are significantly different, except for these 2 treatments, where we do see a difference, but it's not statistically significant. Yeah. Then I did the same comparison for the trait host acceptance based on how many of them killed Caliphora and how many of them killed Lucilia. Here you could see even a stronger effect, that the difference between these 2 treatments that differ in their prior experience shows significant effect. And another thing I would like to mention here is, here I only took the data set where they showed a clear preference, meaning that there were also some samples where they showed the behavior on both. Since I couldn't interpret anything from that, I excluded that, and here I only show the ones that show behavior either on Caliphora or Lucilia. This brings me to the second conclusion, that prior experience, but not the reading history, has an effect on the 2 traits, host recognition and host acceptance, in all the 4 species of Nasonia tested. Then I wanted to know whether there is any interspecies difference in
Dhevi, sorry, 1 minute left.
Yeah, I'm almost done. whether I wanted to see whether there is any interspecies difference in their host recognition and acceptance. So I did another GLM to check whether these 4 species differ in their behavior. So as you could see here, the p-values indicate that they do differ significantly, but this does not tell us in which aspect they do differ. So I wanted to know in which, how do they differ when their prior experience was with Caliphora. As you could see here, they do not differ significantly from each other, meaning that their effect on these 2 traits when their prior experience was with Caliphora is the same for all the 4 species. Yeah. Then I wanted to check the same for host recognition, but when their prior experience was with Lucilia. As you could see here, the 2 specialist species, Gerauti and Oneida, differ from each other significantly. And the other 4 species, or other combinations were the same. Then I did the same for host acceptance trait when their prior experience was with Lucilia. As you could see here, Nasonia longicornis, which is a specialist, differs from Gerauti, which is also a specialist, and also differs from a generalist species, Vitripennis. Again, Oneida differs from Vitripennis and Gerauti. To make it simple, the combination of Vitripennis and Gerauti are similar. I mean, the effect of this trait when their experience was with Lucilia is similar for these species, and then for this species combination, and the other species were significantly different. This brings to my final conclusion that when their effect of, when they experience with Caliphora, they all the 4 species, both generalist and specialist, have a similar effect on their host recognition and host acceptance. But when their experience was with Lucilia, they do differ in some species pairs, which I described before. So the final take-home message from my experiment is prior experience seems to play a big role in their host preference and host recognition, and also in the host acceptance in all the 4 species of Nasonia that I tested. And the generalist species differ mostly from the specialist species by being more plastic in their host preference. And we did not see any difference in the effect of prior experience in their host preference in the specialist species. With this, I would like to thank my whole working group and my grad school and my supervisor, Professor Jürgen Garo, and my co-supervisor, Mark, for all their support. And thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions.